So what I want to do here is focus again on relationships. Not relationships between man and woman, of course, or things like that. The relationship in comic books between characters. Some of the more important relationships in comic history, particularly DC and Marvel. Superman and Lois Lane, from dating to marriage. MJ and Peter Parker, from dating to on and off and the dating again. I can't, for the record, everyone, I can't stand Mary Jane in just about all of her iterations, from comics down to Kirsten Dunst, even Zidania, whatever her name is in the MCU. I don't know. I just think she's a terrible person. Don't get me started. I think she's one for the streets. I can't stand MJ. Do better, Peter. Just saying. And finally, Alfred and Bruce, one of the more important ones as far as relationships, that father-son sort of vibe. But I think the most interesting one in comics is Magneto and Professor X, because they're frenemies, but they're best friends at the same time. They are two people who at the start have two different ideologies. A lot of people like to think that Magneto is based off of Malcolm X. But let's pause there for a second, just so I can backtrack for a second. Magneto's history. Two things are very important. Obviously, Magneto's a mutant and power of mutant magnetism. Stan Lee at one point wrote him as the most powerful mutant there is, and I say by and large, he's not up there. I think he's considered an Omega level mutant, but over time, so many more powerful mutants that are created and written. But anyway, still S tier in terms of power. But two things are important. Yes, he's a mutant. The other thing about him is that he was around during the Holocaust, of him being a Jew during Nazi Germany. Hence, where his original hatred for mankind comes from. A lot of people like to say that, he's based off of Malcolm X, because Professor X is loosely based on Martin Luther King. Completely wrong that he's based off of Malcolm X, because if you think about it, Magneto supports the thought of Homo superior. He's considering the mutants better than the mutants. Henceforth, even with the Nazis, blonde hair, blue eyes, the superior master race overall. So, no, he's much more akin to that in his environment than he is of a clan or a group policing themselves. Professor X, I say much more closely down to Martin Luther King. Humans and mutants can't live in coexistence, yada yada yada. Professor X, over time, he turned out to be a terrible person. Craziest good character arc, and heel turn if you in the Krakoa era. If you guys don't know what that is, please get on board. I think that's probably the most consistent story that X-Men has written. X-Men has a history of being inconsistent. When it's good, it's really good. When it's bad, it's really bad. But the Krakoa era, I thought was really good, probably until the end. But this brings us into a important conversation here. If you don't know Fall of the House of X, Professor X at the end turns out to be a traitor, siding with Orcus, which were producing mutants and producing sentinels, and was doing all sorts of crazy stuff to subjugate and kill mankind. Professor X basically said, hey, if you guys leave the mutants alone, my island, we'll turn against the humans and sell them out. Just leave us alone. Which, of course, all sorts of crazy stuff happened. They didn't really stick the landing, but that's pretty typical of Marvel. We start out great with the story arc, and then at the end, we sort of fumble the bag. So this brings us to, I think, one of the more interesting conversations. X is finally captured, and he's brought forth, about to be put in prison before Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. Magneto abducts him, and pretty much does something that Professor X always did to Magneto in his past, which is pity him. And it's a switch there because usually Professor X would have a conversation with Magneto and pretty much saying, why didn't you see the right that I've been trying to do for you all along? It's that you did not listen. This is where you ended up. And then of course at the end, Magneto in times past would be like, well, the war's still coming, Charles, so yada 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 yada. Watch the end of X-Men 1, like the first one back in 2000. You'll probably get the idea. So here's where it starts here. He says this: Professor X, you quit, you died, I'd made choices, people died, and the rest live. Now I pay the price. What happened to you, Max? So pretty much I feel he's saying, I turned into you. Shoes on the other foot here. I knew Eric all these years. You're definitely Max now. I can see it. I think I'm happy for you. What happened? As you say, Charles, I quit, I died, and then I saw what choices I made. At the beginning, I asked if what we had was enough, and I was right too. We were not enough, Charles. So you see a bit of a character arc. In what do they call it? Self-reflection these days. You hear a lot. He realized that, Magneto realized that I've been wrong all along. I'm the sum of my choices, and the reason I'm in this spot is because of the choices that I made. But Professor X just doesn't really see it this way. He had a paradise for mutants, and they all obviously beat death as well, and it still wasn't enough. Pretty much Magneto saying, for everything that we had, you still couldn't be happy with what we created. Professor X is kind of a jerk. To put it plainly, he kind of just stemmed away and walked away from where he came from. And that's the thing about Professor X. We always think he's just this benevolent, nice man, but no, he's done some pretty scummy stuff in years. That, if you really think about it, he's just as much as a villain as everybody else. My dad will probably watch this. Probably the number one thing that he did that sticks out my father's eyes is the fact that he was part of the Illuminati. And if you remember the Illuminati, that was once upon a time, 2008, I believe. Him, I want to say Namor, Iron Man, Reed Richards. This is coming off the pretty much the end of the Civil War arc. And I'm forgetting whom else, so forgive me. Maybe Black Bolt, but who cares? Because Black Bolt's kind of lame. But so he had plenty of secrets behind the X-Men's back and mutant race, but just never talked about it. But still, brings me back to today. He's became full-on villain, and that's basically what Magneto's trying to tell him. He says this, and he actually admits his flaws. I played this brutal game, the game of laws, of nations, of hard and soft power, to ensure mutant safety. It didn't work. In embracing the world's power, I turned my back on the world. I won't again. I will not appease Charles, nor will I assimilate. I am not ashamed, not of what I am. But when people are oppressed by power simply because of who they are, be they human or mutant, we face the same enemy. We must destroy that enemy together. All of the hatred, all of the fear, all of us, the Krakoan age will not be built by my hand, but it will be built, my friend, and it will be everywhere. So this is amazing, and here's why. So basically Magneto's saying that I've been doing this wrong all along. It's not it's not humans that I have to fight against. It's mutants and humans who abuse power. And even further, he's admitting that, we were wrong to create the Krakoa Island, or the wrong way to go about doing it. There has to be better angels that have to do it. And so he's admitted that the island will be made. There will be a country, but it won't be us. And in fact, what we're trying to build is going to be all over the world. So, of course, Charles even says, after all these years, all these arguments, until dawn, after I compromise, we forge a nation born on your mutant essentialism. After I sacrifice all the best parts of myself to ensure anyone survived our hubris, now you turn to me and say, Xavier was right. Wow. So again, Charles, total scumbag, total douche, doesn't see the errors of his ways. Again, I love the relationship between the two of them. They are friends, they are close friends, but they're just having as usual, they're on opposite sides. Up until recently. They may be on the same side for now. I don't know. I think that we just tabled Professor X. This issue, this is from issue 700. This came out probably about, I say, 3 or 4 months ago at this point. I've been trying to keep up with X-Men loosely, but we've taken Professor X off the table. He hasn't been in an issue since then, been throughout his different books, whether it be X-Men or Nyx or X-Force. And right now, basically, Magneto is the new leader of the X-Men. If you've seen him, for some reason, he's in the chair and a little bit older. X-Men issue 7 just came out yesterday. I read it. They did explain a little bit as to why, and of course we will expand a little bit more upon it. But again, Professor X, Magneto, probably one of the most important and more interesting relationships in comics. I really love the back and forth, high and low relationship of them. At the end of the day, they are friends, but just on a different side of the argument. So I don't know. I hope to do more stuff like this. Please let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe. Hit the little bell and alarm. It's been a couple weeks since we actually recorded together as a trio. Vacations between the three of us, me, Sean, and Austin, and illness. And so, we'll get back in the platform. We do have a new guest coming in. We'll be recording next week. So yeah, that'll do it. Later, skaters.